My son pushed a stack of papers toward me and called it a formality. I picked up the pen. Then I asked the whole room to turn to page 12, and the silence that followed had a texture I will never forget. I truly appreciate your support on Dad's revenge stories. Which corner of the world are you watching this from? Share your hometown below. Please note, certain fictional elements are included for storytelling and moral depth. Any matching names or settings are accidental, yet the core takeaway speaks volumes. The night of the harvest dinner, the valley smelled like crushed grapes and wood smoke, the way it had every October for 40 years. But standing at the head of my own table, watching 25 strangers arrange themselves in chairs my late wife Maggie had chosen decades ago, I knew this October would be different. They were Claire's people, her father, her cousins, her college friends. Business associates who'd never set foot on Callaway land until my son Ethan started sending out what he called founder invitations. Douglas Weston, Claire's father, arrived first, clapping me on the back like I was hired help. Big night, Robert, big night for all of us. He had no idea how right he was. Walter Pewitt, who'd worked my cellar for 19 years, stood near the corridor with a glass of water and the look of a man finally about to set something heavy down. He caught my eye and gave one small nod. Ethan stood at the far end of the table in a new sport coat, rehearsing his role as a man who belonged. Claire circulated with hydrangeas from a San Francisco florist, replacing the wildflowers Maggie always cut from the property herself. Before dessert, Douglas rose and tapped his glass. 18 months ago, my son-in-law came to me with a vision, 40 years of Callaway craftsmanship, and the kind of legacy most families spend generations building. Tonight, we celebrate the birth of something extraordinary. To our new company, Callaway Heritage Vintners, $14.5 million of American excellence. The room erupted. I did not raise my glass. Ethan slid a leather portfolio across the table. Dad, it's just a formality, standard authorization. Margaret already reviewed it. He meant Claire's notary, not my attorney. I opened the cover, ran my thumb along the page edge the way my father taught me. Take your time with anything someone is rushing you to sign. I lifted the pen toward the signature line. Then I set it down. Before I sign anything, I'd like everyone to turn to page 12. Ethan's jaw tightened. Dad, that's just the appendix supplier documentation. It's not relevant. Page 12, I said again, quieter, steadier. Douglas, with a lawyer's reflex, put on his reading glasses and turned to it. The room followed him the way rooms follow people who seem to know what they're doing, and the silence that followed had weight. To understand that page, you have to go back 22 months, to a January morning in the East Cellar when I still believed my son. Maggie had been gone 14 months. The house felt too large. When Ethan and Claire moved up from San Francisco to learn the business, it felt like the right thing to hand him the keys, literally. The brass key to the main cellar gate that Maggie had once pressed into my palm and told me never to lose. Ethan took it with both hands, and Maggie always said a man who cradles what you give him is a man who keeps it. I believed I was seeing that man. For a few weeks it was real. Then March came. I found a stranger running quality checks on my bottling line, Daniel Reeve, hired by Claire without a word to me. I found Ethan in Maggie's old office, waving me off mid-call, and when I asked who authorized the new hire, he said, "You don't need to be involved in every staffing decision." By April, the production schedule on the cellar door no longer matched the one I'd approved. "Your old accounts," he said of my buyers, "operate on a different pace than the market." 3 words that told me everything. In May, I found the hallway wall bare. Maggie's photographs, our first harvest, her hands in the dirt planting the first Cabernet rootstock, her 30-year anniversary portrait laughing at something outside the frame, all gone. Replaced with fresh paint in a whiter shade than hers. Claire called them insular. I pressed 2 fingers to the cool wall where her face used to be. That's when Walter found me. "I should have told you things sooner," he said, and asked to meet that night. What he brought me in a canvas bag would have broken a lesser man's composure. 3 bottles of our reserve Cabernet, the one Maggie spent 7 years perfecting, that won double gold in 2017, except the wine inside wasn't hers. Bulk Central Valley product, blended just well enough to fool a casual drinker, dressed in our label. Walter said it had been going out since September, and Ethan had told the cellar crew I'd personally approved the new formula. He'd used my name to sell counterfeit wine to my own customers. Then came the paperwork. A forged letter on my cardiologist's letterhead recommending I transition management responsibilities. A total fabrication, as Dr. Marsh confirmed the moment I called her. My son wasn't just running my winery. He was building a medical and legal case to take it from me permanently, one manufactured document at a time. And then the notebook. Maggie's green leather notebook, 12 years of blending notes. The formula for our reserve wine, existing nowhere but in her handwriting in a locked cabinet in my study. In June, Claire staged a renovation, and during the chaos, the notebook vanished. 2 weeks later, a catalog arrived from a Sonoma winery I'd never worked with, describing a new reserve blend using Maggie's exact, singular technique. My son had sold his mother's life's work to a competitor. I called my attorney, Margaret Shaw, who'd known this property since 2001. "Don't confront anyone else," she told me. Not yet, so I started watching instead, and 40 years of running a winery teaches you to read a room the way you read weather. I found unmarked delivery trucks coming twice a week to a cellar annex Ethan had quietly rekeyed. I cut myself a new key and let myself in one night, and confirmed what Walter's bottles had already told me: bulk wine bought for $11 a case. Sold under our label at $96 a bottle. When I confronted Walter about his own quiet complicity, he confessed Ethan had threatened him with a fabricated theft accusation to keep him silent. He handed over a shoebox of printed emails, 18 months of correspondence between Ethan and a bulk supplier in Fresno, instructing them to keep the cases unlabeled and use the service entrance. The math came to roughly 4,200 cases and a gross margin of over $1 million, built entirely on fraud. Claire's contribution came with a clipboard, handed to me after a dinner party I hadn't been consulted on, listing chores for me to do in my own dining room, as though I were staff. My accountant, Nora Finch, closed her office door one morning and showed me the rest. A monthly elder care expense line, $4,712 a month, forged with my signature, totaling $127,000 for services I never received. A consulting company called CRW Strategic Advisors paid $42,000 for a 12-page brand document, registered 8 months earlier under Claire's maiden name. And when Nora started asking questions, Ethan threatened her job with discrepancies that didn't exist. She'd spent 6 weeks building an airtight, time-stamped case against him before she ever told me. Then came Boyd and Renee Harrison, old friends, Claire said. Boyd was a commercial land broker who mentioned clients within 90 seconds of meeting me and spent a week photographing my oldest vines. I found our property map refolded in the wrong direction, a pencil rectangle drawn around 60 acres of heritage vineyard, the ground Maggie planted by hand in 1985, labeled Phase 1. Harrison Associates. My son was planning to sell the ground his mother was buried in spirit next to. The worst discovery came from Ethan's own unlocked laptop. 4 documents, a fabricated psychiatric letter describing me as confused and declining. A draft conservatorship petition, filing to have a court declare me incompetent, with Ethan named as petitioner and proposed conservator. A list of doctors he'd shopped the diagnosis to. And a timeline ending with the words, transfer of operational and legal authority, estimated completion, Q1 2025. My son had scheduled the day he'd take everything from me. Then a catalog came in the mail from a winery I'd never partnered with. And on the center spread was Maggie's face, a photograph I'd never even seen, captioned under the visionary direction of Ethan Calloway. He had used his mother's image, her story. Her frostier survival tale from 1988 to raise $1.4 million from investors, most of it from Douglas Weston's own family, who'd been told, in writing, that I fully authorized the partnership. My son had sold pieces of his mother to strangers. I told Margaret I was ready to move whenever she needed me. "Give me 3 weeks," she said. In those final months, Margaret quietly filed a preservation notice locking every company record in place. Walter brought his shoebox of evidence to her office, organized by date with a handwritten index. Nora delivered updated financials showing the fraud pattern stretching across 14 months. A forensic accountant, David Reyes, spent 3 days on the books and called the case airtight. By the last week of August, Margaret told me, "We are ready." The evening before the dinner, I went down to the cellar alone and opened the last bottle of a small experimental blend Maggie made the autumn before she was diagnosed. Walter joined me quietly, apologizing for the months he'd stayed silent out of fear for his own job. "You showed up when it counted," I told him. "That's enough." We sat together in that old stone silence until nearly 10 o'clock, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. The morning of the dinner, Claire had replaced our warm harvest linens with stark white hotel tablecloths and hung a projection screen exactly where Maggie's vineyard photograph used to be. Douglas arrived 2 hours early in a charcoal suit, admiring a printed program with a photo of my own vineyard on the cover, pulled from my phone without asking. My granddaughter Sophie found me in the kitchen in her red boots. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "No," I told her and meant it. By 2:45, 25 people were seated beneath that screen showing land that belonged to me. Ethan opened his portfolio with the satisfied motion of a man who believed he'd thought of everything. Walter caught my eye from the doorway. One nod. Through the glass, I could see Nora's laptop already open, the hard drive already connected. Douglas rose and lifted his glass. 24 others rose with him. I did not. "Before we drink," I said, in the same voice I use with my cellar crew, "I'd like everyone to turn to page 12. "Robert, this is a celebration," Ethan said. "We can review documentation after." "Page 12, I repeated. Douglas's reading glasses came out again, and this time he read it in front of the people whose money was on that table. A supplier ledger, 22 line items across 14 months. Valley Floor Cellars of Fresno, $9 to $13 a case, received under a signature I never wrote. The color drained out of Douglas Weston's face. "This is the record for what's been sold under our reserve label for over a year," I said. "That wine cost $11 a case. It was sold at $96 a bottle. I never authorized a single purchase." "These are being taken out of context," Ethan said, pushing back from his chair. "Walter." He walked in with the shoebox and set Ethan's own email in front of Douglas, instructions to keep the cases unlabeled. Use the service entrance, coordinate with Reeve. Douglas read it once and didn't look at Ethan again. "Nora." She turned her laptop toward the table, the elder care account. $127,000, my name on every falsified entry. The front door opened. Margaret Shaw walked in with David Reyes behind her and a process server carrying 2 document packets, one for Ethan, one for Claire. Claire pressed her fingers to her lips until they went white. Douglas set down the forensic report, folded his glasses, and looked at my son. "Where is my money?" "It's in the operating account," Ethan said. "You're looking at this out of context." "The operating account was frozen this morning," Margaret said from the door. Douglas turned to the room, not to Ethan. "I put in $350,000. I told my family Robert Calloway personally approved this." His voice cracked. "Did he?" David Reyes answered before Ethan could. "The signature on the authorization was reproduced from a 2021 equipment lease. I've testified to findings like this in court 41 times. Claire turned on her husband. "You told me the authorization was clean. You told me nothing could be challenged. You signed the CRW invoices," Ethan shot back. "You approved the coding." "I said a lot of things," he muttered. "So did you," Claire said, her voice breaking. I hadn't moved from my chair the entire time. I didn't need to. Douglas buttoned his jacket. "I owe you a conversation, Robert, not today." Soon, 5 other guests followed him out within minutes. I stood and looked at what remained of the room. "The food shouldn't go to waste." Then to Ethan and Claire, "Sunday, 5 o'clock. "And go where?" Claire asked, her voice raw. "That," I said, "is the first question in a long time that's entirely yours to answer." That night. Margaret confirmed what I already knew. Ethan's operational authority had been revoked weeks earlier, effective the moment the process server delivered notice in front of 25 witnesses. The conservatorship petition was never filed. Dr. Marsh's actual evaluation found nothing wrong with me. He'd built his entire plan on the assumption I wasn't building one of my own. Later, I found Ethan standing alone at the edge of the heritage vines in the dark. "I needed something to be mine," he said. "Something that wasn't just handed to me." "Then you should have built something," I told him. There was always a version of this where you could have asked instead of taken. His shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but the way a man's shoulders drop when he finally sets something down. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "That's where you start," I told him and put my hand on his shoulder. Not forgiveness, something older. By December, the winery had a new operating agreement. Walter Pewitt and Nora Finch weren't just employees anymore. They were stakeholders, given a real ownership share in the company they'd risked everything to protect. Maggie's portrait went back on the wall that same week. The original, retrieved from a storage box, hung on the same nail in the same light. And the new succession plan made sure no single person could ever again hold controlling interest without an independent board behind them. Margaret called it a lock that couldn't be picked by a marriage. I called it common sense, applied a little late, but applied correctly. On a cold morning in January, Sophie found me at the Heritage Rose in her red boots, carrying Maggie's old garden trowel. "Are we planting today?" she asked. We knelt together in the same soil Maggie had knelt in with her bare hands back in 1985 and pressed new rootstock into the ground. "Wine like your grandmother's takes time," I told her. She nodded seriously the way only a 6-year-old can. "Everything good does," she said. "If this story taught me anything, it's that dignity doesn't need an audience." I fought for what Maggie and I built not with anger but with patience and truth. I made my own mistakes too. I trusted too long without watching closely enough. If someone in your life is slowly moving you out of your own story, don't wait 8 months. Speak sooner. Document everything. A kind heart isn't the same as a blind one. What you build with love cannot be taken by someone who only understands it as money. The oldest trees have the deepest roots, and this family's story, like every real one, doesn't end at the dinner table. It continues in the ground, in the hands of the people who choose to stay. If something here moved you, leave a comment below. I read every one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you never miss what comes next.